It was obvious to all that this American cyclist was different. As a 16-year-old, he beat a field of established senior riders and announced that one day he'd like to win the Tour de France. Never mind that no American had ever ridden in it yet. Never mind that he was a middle-class kid from Nevada and that professional cycling was a French-speaking, blue-collar European profession a continent away. From the roads of Northern California to France's Champs-Élysées, from battling the sport's biggest names, from betrayals to triumph and to comebacks against the odds, Greg LeMond was out to change the face of cycling for good. LeMond was not the first American to ride in the European peloton, nor was he the first American to ride in the Tour de France. However, the arrival of the young American in Europe marked the beginning of his lasting effect on cycling. His talent was well known in U.S. cycling circles, but he caught the eye of many Europeans when he took the Junior World Championships road title in 1979 in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The following year was an Olympic year. Unfortunately, the U.S. boycott ended LeMond's Olympic dreams, and unwilling to wait another 4 years, he turned pro for the 1981 season. His new team leader, Frenchman Bernard Hinault, was on the brink of winning his third Tour title. The step up to the European pro ranks didn't seem to faze LeMond, and by May he had scored his first pro stage win at the Tour de l'Oise. And when it came time for the World Championships in Switzerland, LeMond went one better than the year before, distancing himself from the pack. He finished over a minute ahead of Audrey van der Poel and Stephen Roche, becoming at 22 the first non-European to win the World Championships. By 1984, LeMond had arrived, and as world champion, he would finally ride in the world's biggest bike race, the Tour de France. LeMond's first Tour ride was solid and hinted at true Tour potential. Although failing to win a stage, LeMond rode to an impressive third place in support of teammate and Tour winner Laurent Fignon. LeMond became the first American to climb atop the Tour de France podium, the first American to successfully tackle the Europeans at their own game. Missing the '83 Tour and now finishing second in '84 left Hinault stuck with 4 Tour wins. For 8 years, the Frenchman had dominated cycling and the Tour, both with his talent and with his arrogance, and he badly wanted a record equaling 5th title. Winning 5 Tours was a feat that only 2 men so far had achieved, and it would truly write Hinault into Tour history. Standing on the podium that day in 1984, Hinault saw his competition and his solution in one glance. The confident young LeMond would become one of his main rivals for the 1985 Tour. Whether Hinault signed LeMond as an asset or to force his main rival into a subordinate support role is unclear. What was clear was that the partnership of 2 strong, viciously ambitious riders was headed for heartbreak. Hinault was a farmer's son from Brittany. True to his roots, he epitomized hard work. The force of Hinault's mere presence dominated the peloton. He was a proven winner, stubborn and strong as an ox. Hinault represented the traditional hierarchical ways of the European peloton. LeMond was everything but that. American, ambitious, and without a hint of the dues-paying ways that were the foundation of the European peloton. Many of LeMond's ideas would benefit other pro cyclists. He introduced the concept of agents and increased the earning potential of not just himself, but all riders, from the stars to the lowliest paid neo-pros. At a time when his team captain, Hinault, was earning only $150,000 a year, LeMond signed a 3-year, $1 million contract with La Vie Claire for 1985. The Tour, the longest in 15 years at 4,109 kilometers, started in textbook fashion. With defending champion Laurent Fignon out with tendinitis, Hinault established dominance the first day by winning the prologue and donning the yellow jersey. LeMond was 21 seconds back in 5th place. By stage 11, Hinault led teammate LeMond by 4 minutes, with Irishman Stephen Roche at 6 minutes back. The 5th Tour title seemed to be headed Hinault's way. But then, one touch of wheels and everything changed. Caught up in a vicious crash in the closing kilometers of the stage 14 finish at Saint-Étienne, Hinault hit the deck hard. Hinault gathered himself up and rode to the finish with blood streaming from a head wound. Roche had not benefited from the crash, but LeMond, without trying, gained almost 2 minutes on his team captain and was now only 3 minutes and 32 seconds back overall. The next two stages passed without incident, and Hinault, sporting two black eyes, maintained his lead over LeMond and Roche. Unfortunately for Hinault, stage 17 hit the mountains. It was obvious that his broken nose was hampering his breathing. His climbing suffered. Seeing the opportunity, Roche attacked on the Tourmalet, and LeMond went with the Irishman to cover the move. Hinault, the team captain, was unable to respond, and Roche and LeMond built a steady lead. To LeMond, it made perfect sense. He was not only protecting his own position, but also that of his team leader. However, the team saw differently, and it was not long before the team car arrived alongside LeMond. He was ordered to stop attacking and wait for Hinault. LeMond was flabbergasted. Hinault was struggling, and he, LeMond, was in a clear position to respond to an attack and save the day. But the gap is only 45 seconds. He's in the next group, said Coakley, lying to LeMond and reducing Hinault's gap deficit to a fraction of the real figure. When the next group caught up, Hinault was nowhere in sight, and LeMond realized that he had been fooled by his own team. LeMond rode on, frustrated and bewildered. He crossed the line in tears.
Why not? I have nothing against Hinault. I want him to win the Tour. I felt that he was in my place at the last climb. Do you want me to punch you in the face? No. Get out of here.
When we were in the Luzard-Didel stage, he asked to attack, and they told him, okay, only on the condition that he leaves the other guys behind. It's normal, because I had the yellow jersey, but he didn't go ahead of Roche or Anderson. He risked losing everything, even including his second place, because Roche could have taken it, and he would have caused the loss of the jersey for the team.
5, 4, 3, 1.
An opportunity as good as that on the Tourmalet never presented itself again in the '85 Tour. LeMond did manage to mark an important turning point, however, in Tour history. His victory in the Stage 20 Lac de Vassivier individual time trial, but it was the first Tour de France stage win ever by an American. Hinault duly crossed the line in Paris the next day to win the 1985 Tour de France and become only the third man to win 5 Tour titles. As he stood atop the podium, he swore that he would repay LeMond the following year by riding in support of the young American. Join us after the break as LeMond and Hinault stage a final showdown in the 1986 Tour de France. After the crushing disappointment of the 1985 Tour, Greg LeMond was contractually bound to ride with Bernard Hinault again in 1986. Although Hinault had promised to help LeMond win the Tour that year, the American was in for another harsh shock. Hinault couldn't play second fiddle any more than he could fly to the moon. Perhaps Hinault had meant to support LeMond, but once he arrived at the start in Boulogne, the thought of a record 6th win became an irresistible temptation. Although Hinault bettered LeMond in the prologue, it was only by 2 seconds. Of more significance was that, for the first time since 1980, Hinault had not won the Tour opener. Both LeMond and Hinault were on form. On Stage 9, a 61-kilometer individual time trial around Nantes, Hinault bettered LeMond by 44 seconds and moved into 3rd place on GC.
What will Greg LeMond be thinking now, because the Blaireau, the Badger is back?
A few days later, Hinault unleashed an attack on the road to Pau. The Frenchman seemed to have decided that if he could take an early and dominant lead, then he could force LeMond into a support role, eliminate him as a rival, and then ride on for his 6th Tour title. Although he didn't cross the line first, Hinault attacked again on Stage 12, and by the finish line was 3.5 minutes ahead of LeMond and a whopping 11 minutes ahead of Fignon. With a typically French shrug of the shoulders, Hinault explained that he was in fact doing LeMond a favor by riding hard to break down LeMond's opponents. The next day, Hinault's arrogance may have gotten the better of him as he attacked on the Tourmalet, scene of his collapse the previous year. Of all the climbs in the Tour de France, the Tourmalet belonged to Greg LeMond. He always rode well on this stage. By contrast, on the 3rd climb of the day, the Périsord, Hinault was tiring. Meanwhile, LeMond was feeling great.
And Hinault is cracking. Eno is beginning to lose ground.
As Eno crumbled, the American power to his second Tour stage win and a 4-minute 45-second advantage at the finish in Super Bagnères.
And they've been beaten fair and square by the American from California.
In one day, he clawed his way back from a seemingly insurmountable 5 minutes 25 seconds down to within 40 seconds of Hinault's yellow jersey. In the world's toughest sporting event, the team is everything. The Hinault-LeMond conflict, however, was splitting the La Vie Claire team in two. In effect, it became two small squads, the Euros siding with Hinault. Fortunately for LeMond, fellow American Andy Hampsten stuck by his side. LeMond attacked again on the 17th stage to Serre-Chevalier. Although he didn't win the stage, he wrested the yellow jersey from Hinault's grasp, took a 2-minute 24-second lead on GC, and relegated Hinault not just to second, but to third in the overall ranking. LeMond was in yellow for the first time in his life, the first American ever to do so. The next day's stage 18 had a somewhat surreal quality to it. After Luis Herrera led over the Galibier, Hinault was first to the top of the Croix de Fer. LeMond was shadowing him all the way, and the two teammates became locked in competition, riding the stage side by side and eventually crossing the line hand in hand. It seemed as though Hinault was finally acknowledging the arrival of LeMond, but yet he still found it hard to concede. We'll see who's the strongest in the time trial, the Frenchman added confrontationally, referring to the penultimate stage.
He attacked me from the beginning of the Tour de France. He's never helped me once, and I don't feel confident at all with him.
But by the time of the stage 20 individual time trial, LeMond was flying, and not even a crash in the final bend could stop the American. The crash cost him 25 seconds and the stage, which was won by Hinault, but LeMond had retained the yellow and a solid 2-minute lead over the stubborn Frenchman. Hinault may have won the battle, but 3 days later, Greg LeMond won the war. The race arrived in Paris with LeMond 3 minutes 10 seconds ahead of Hinault. Hinault was vanquished, and Greg LeMond became the first non-European ever to win the Tour de France. It had taken him 10 years, but he had finally won the big one, the Tour de France. Standing atop the podium on the Champs-Élysées that day, life couldn't have been much better for the trailblazing young American. The only problem with life's highs is that they make the lows seem all the worse. Coming up, LeMond's perfect world is shattered by a brush with death. After the Tour triumph of the previous year, Greg LeMond had stepped out of Bernard Hinault's shadow and onto his own team, Toshiba, but he was about to face the toughest challenge of his life. Back in the USA to recuperate from a broken hand, LeMond was hunting with his family and friends just days before his return to Europe when he was accidentally hit in the back by a shotgun blast. Rushed to a hospital with a collapsed lung, vast loss of blood, and a torso full of birdshot, LeMond's life hung in the balance. 4 long, hard months after the accident, LeMond was back on the bike, but he could barely keep up with the local amateur riders. He was a million miles from the fitness and euphoria of his 1986 Tour victory. LeMond's appearance at the Tour seemed improbable. The start to the prologue proved that anything was possible. Defending champion Pedro Delgado missed his start time and lost almost 3 minutes before the race had even begun. Although still ranked only 14th overall, the world knew that Greg LeMond was back when he stormed to victory in the Stage 5 Dinard de Rennes time trial. It may have rained throughout LeMond's ride, but by the time he mounted the podium as the stage winner, he must have felt as if the sun was shining. Life was good. He was fit again, and he'd won his first race in 3 years. More importantly, he was back in the yellow jersey. The glory lasted 5 days until Frenchman Laurent Fignon outrode the American on the stage to Super Bagnères. Fignon attacked, and LeMond, although countering, ended the day 7 seconds behind Fignon on the GC. The seesaw battle continued as LeMond took back the jersey 5 days later on the stage 15 time trial and led the Frenchman by 40 seconds. LeMond was refreshed from a rest day in yellow, and on the very next stage, 16, he rode aggressively. He chased attacks by Delgado, Alcala, Mote, and Tunisa as each tried to isolate and break him. LeMond finished 4th on the stage and even gained a few seconds back on Fignon.
And who was to know how valuable those few seconds might be? Greg LeMond was now 53 seconds in front of the Frenchman.
But stage 17 was a different story, Alpe d'Huez. LeMond felt the previous day's efforts and lost contact with Fignon, and by the finish line, he had lost the yellow jersey too. In the short 18th stage, the race was expected to be fairly quiet. Fignon, however, had other plans, and he escaped on a small climb, won the stage, and gained another 24 seconds over LeMond. With 3 days remaining, his lead was now a reassuring 50 seconds. The final stage time trial was short, only 28.5 kilometers, and the view generally held was that no man could make up a 50-second deficit in so short a distance. Fignon believed it too, and perhaps prematurely congratulated the American on his amazing second place. LeMond, feeling really confident for the first time in 2 years, maintained that the deficit was not insurmountable, and besides, as the second-place rider, he had nothing to lose and everything to gain. He left the start house with his now trademark aero handlebars and helmet and set out for the ride of his life. Fignon started 2 minutes later. The difference in style was noticeable from the start. LeMond powered his bike effortlessly, while Fignon wavered and never seemed to settle down.
Greg LeMond's time trial is over. A time of 26 minutes 57 seconds, a record speed of 34 miles an hour. He's across the line, and the clock shows a time of 27 minutes 55. He's 58 seconds slower than LeMond. Fignon has lost the Tour de France by 8 seconds.
The rest is history. A margin of victory of 8 seconds after a race of 3,300 kilometers, 3 weeks, and over 87 hours of racing. Victory snatched from under the nose of the Frenchman. Fignon was devastated, distraught, disbelieving, and he collapsed onto the ground at the news. LeMond's dream season was rounded out with a dramatic, rain-sodden win at the World Championships. It was the greatest comeback in all of sports, and Sports Illustrated magazine recognized it by naming LeMond as their Athlete of the Year. In a country dominated by major league team sports, LeMond is the only cyclist ever to achieve this honor. LeMond had laid the ghosts of Hinault and Fignon finally to rest, and the 1990s heralded a new era of cycling. Fresh faces, young riders. Coming up, LeMond almost blows the 1990 Tour de France on the very first stage. Greg began the 1990 season woefully overweight and was then sick with mononucleosis during the spring. Hardly good preparation for the defense of the Tour title. In true LeMond style, however, he was informed by the start of the Tour and missed out on the opening day yellow jersey by only 4 seconds, eventually finishing second in the prologue. All plans went out the window the following day on stage 1, when a 4-man break gained 10 minutes on the peloton. Canadian Steve Bauer took the yellow jersey. Bauer would hold the yellow jersey for 9 days, but had no chance in the mountains. Of more concern was the third-place rider, a little-known Italian by the name of Claudio Chiappucci, who had won the King of the Mountains competition at that year's Giro. LeMond, who had been just 4 seconds out of the lead at the end of the first day, needed all of his guile and patience to slowly crawl back Chiappucci's 10-minute lead. Greg could only put 9 seconds between himself and Chiappucci on the stage 12 time trial to be 8 minutes 55 seconds back. But one stage later, after a great ride to Saint-Etienne, the gap was cut to a more manageable 2 minutes 34 seconds, and LeMond was up to third overall. And again, the Pyrenees, and especially the Tourmalet, were good to LeMond. He made the decisive break without Chiappucci and grabbed back all but 5 seconds on the deficit on stage 16 to lose Ardennes. LeMond had clinched his 2 previous Tour wins on the final time trial, and 1990 would be no exception. He crushed Chiappucci, beating him by over 2 minutes, and took the yellow jersey for the first time in the race. With only 1 day and no major obstacles to go, LeMond had timed it perfectly. The race arrived in Paris with LeMond in the lead, and the man who had become the first non-European to win the world's toughest bike race recorded a 3rd Tour title. He now joined the illustrious company: Jacques Anquetil, Eddie Merckx, Bernard Hinault, Philippe Thys, and Louis-Jean Bobet. By 1991, LeMond was 30 years of age. Wins were more elusive, yet he seemed to have things under control at the 1991 Tour. He wore the yellow jersey for 5 days before the race hit the mountain. But there the story changed. Not only was LeMond in trouble on the climbs, but Indurain had returned considerably lighter and was now the leader of his team. To his credit, LeMond finished the race, but for the first time in his career, finished off the Tour de France podium in 7th place. 1992 was the beginning of the end for LeMond.
Look at this time by Miguel Indurain, the best man on the clock.
In the Tour de France, after losing 4 minutes to Indurain in the Stage 9 time trial, LeMond dropped out of the greatest race for the first time ever. It seemed as if cycling was passing Greg LeMond by, and he had yet to realize it. He battled on through the '94 season and even started the Tour. His form was gone, though, and a vastly overweight LeMond quit what would be his last Tour de France.
I don't know, this is not what I imagined finishing my career like this.
Shortly after that, LeMond announced his retirement from the sport, citing that a rare muscle disease, mitochondrial myopathy, prevented him from performing at his previous lofty world-beating levels. LeMond ended his career having flown the colors of no less than 7 different pro teams, and for those 7 teams he recorded 47 pro wins, 2 world championships, and 3 wins in the Tour de France. In addition to the greatness conferred upon him by his Tour wins, LeMond can be proud of other intangible achievements. He paved the way for other American riders to race in Europe. His constant search for technological advantages led to the introduction of aerodynamic handlebars and helmets, clipless pedals, disc wheels, and an altogether more analytical approach to performance. Whether by choice or necessity, LeMond was also the first rider to forego riding the entire season full bore, focusing instead on the one event that was most important to him, the one event that really mattered, the Tour de France. In the 15 years since his first pro win, only one American has ever had anything near the same success or impact on professional cycling, and few cyclists have left a legacy as memorable as that of Greg LeMond.